So fellas, obviously this weekend is UFC 313 Porton versus Ankalaev, and I'm a massive fan of this card, not only because it's stacked on paper, but also because this is one of those cards where there's just so many fun fights. There's not really any boring fights. I feel like there's going to be a lot of fireworks on this card, and obviously this is going to be my full card predictions for every single one of the fights. Starting off with a short notice fight. Chris Gutierrez taking on John Castaneda. Obviously, Gutierrez was supposed to fight Gene Matsumoto, which ended up falling short because Moto fought a few weeks ago. And John Castaneda was supposed to fight last week against Douglas de Andrade, which ended up falling short. I'm going to be going with Chris Gutierrez to win this one by decision. Gutierrez, I feel like he's an underrated bantamweight. I'm not saying he's entertaining and he's quite a boring fighter, which is why he doesn't really get the credit, but I feel like he's kind of underrated. He actually holds the record for the second highest striking accuracy in the bantamweight history. And he's just a good striker, man. He's good at keeping people, well, he's good at being on the back foot and piecing people up with his leg kicks. He's a really good kicker, is Chris Gutierrez. Good at the outside work, good at picking people apart. And I feel like, yeah, for that reason, he's quite underrated. He's also defensively very sound. And like I said before, John Castaneda was supposed to fight last week. You never know, there might be weight cut issues where he's been cutting weight and then he's kind of got to bulk up again just to cut weight again. Then it could affect him in the fight. So I am going to go with Chris Gutierrez to win this one by decision. I think he's quite underrated. He's a good striker. And even in fights that he's losing to the likes of Song Yadong and Pedro Munoz, it isn't like he's necessarily in danger in those fights. I still think he's one of the best bantamweights not one of the best bantamweights, but I feel like he's a top 20 bantamweight. I can see him picking apart John Castaneda in this fight on the back foot, while Castaneda kind of puts the pressure on, mixing it with the grappling. But I'm a big fan of Gutierrez's take down the fence. So the keys to victory for both these fighters, for Chris Gutierrez, it's to circle the octagon. Just do Chris Gutierrez things. Circle the octagon, smash his leg with leg kicks, and just pick him apart from the outside. Do what Chris Gutierrez normally does. He likes to be against the cage, picking people apart, and I feel like he's going to do that against John Castaneda. And then for John Castaneda, getting close, pressure him, close the distance between him and Gutierrez. Mix up the grappling, because he actually has got decent grappling as Castaneda. He's had a couple of submissions in the UFC. And make it a more brawly fight. I would not recommend going for a technical fight with Chris Gutierrez, because the likelihood is you're going to get unanimous decisions. So make it a bit of a dog fight, a bit of a brawly fight, and mix it up with the grappling. That would be my advice to John Castaneda, but I am going to go with Chris Gutierrez to win this one by decision. And then we have Ozzy Diaz versus Djordan Santos. I'm going to go in with Djordan Santos to win this one by decision. I feel like Ozzy Diaz is one of those fighters that you look at in the UFC and you're like, how are you still in the UFC? How are you still getting an opportunity to compete in the UFC? He hasn't really looked good in any fight as Ozzy Diaz. In his most recent fight, he got brutally knocked out by Zhang Mingyang, as most Zhang Mingyang victims do. And he's also lost to Joe Pyfer by knockout on the Contender Series before, so he's 0-2 in the UFC in the Contender Series. Even in LFA, in fights that he's winning, he's having to face adversity early on. So he's even looking dominant outside of the UFC, which is maybe why the UFC have decided to bring in him. So I'm still not entirely sure why Ozzy Diaz has got a contract. I'm going to go with Djordan Santos. There's limited data on Djordan Santos. He's only fought on the Contender Series, but he did look good in the Contender Series. He faced another heavy grappler where he was able to keep the fight standing. He has got a decent gas tank. He's a great striker as well. Not a great striker, but he's a good striker, Santos. And he's just a bit of a dog. Likes making it into a dogfight, likes making it a bit scrappy. He's got a nice rangy striking style where he's got decent boxing, and his takedown defense is solid too. I'm going to go Santos by decision. I'm not saying this with full confidence. I could see Ozzy Diaz maybe clipping Djordan Santos, maybe taking him down, mixing it with the grappling. I'm not sure what Ozzy Diaz's game plan would be, but I've just not been impressed. Every single time we see Ozzy Diaz compete, he either faces adversity and then wins, or he just simply gets finished. So I'm going to go with Djordan Santos, decent prospect from the Contender Series. Now, the keys to victory for both of these guys, for Ozzy Diaz, it's to stay consistent for 3 rounds. That's what he kind of does best, is Ozzy Diaz. He's not really a first round finisher. He likes staying consistent. Grapple, that's the best chance of beating Djordan Santos. And don't brawl with him. That's what Santos wants you to do. Stay technical, and hope that maybe later on in the fight you can find a finish. And for Djordan Santos, it's to force him into a dogfight. Make it scrappy, make it messy. Attack him in the clinch, because he is going to clinch, and avoid grappling, because that's when you give him the best chance of winning. And just stay heavy with the pressure striking, because I think that's what Djordan Santos did really good in the Contender Series when he faced Will Curry, who's actually a decent grappler in himself. And I think that's what he should do in this fight. And then we've got another Contender Series turned UFC fighter, Mairon Santos taking on Francis Marshall. Striker versus grappler, and I'm going to go with the Brazilian striker to win in this case. I'm going to go with Mairon Santos to win this one by TKO in the second round. I was going back and forth of if I was going to pick him to win by decision or TKO, but I'm going to pick him to win this one by TKO in the second round for Mairon Santos. He's a really good striker as Mairon Santos. He's one of these unique strikers. He just beat Khan Orfley, and Khan Orfley is actually a pretty solid fighter. We just saw him against Mahabir Naimov, and Orfley is actually some decent talent in the UFC, and he went out there and knocked him out. Looked really good in that fight. Looked very powerful, very sharp on the feet, and even in the Contender Series, and even in the Ultimate Fighter beforehand, he looked really good on the Ultimate Fighter. Just the way that he was picking everybody apart on the feet. He's a very good striker as Mairon Santos. I think he is a bit of a prospect as well in this division. I think he could go quite far with his striking, and obviously the grappling is the big if with Francis Marshall, but Marshall's got a bit of a weird grappling style where he kind of just leans in. He kind of just forces himself in like he's watching Dricus du Plessis. He leans in with his head up in the air. Not really much defense, and I feel like that's the exact style of grappler that Mairon Santos would want, because Mairon Santos is a bit of a counter-puncher. That's how he beat Khan Orfley. He likes counter-punching in all of his fights, and when you're facing somebody like Francis Marshall, who has kind of dodgy takedown entries, I feel like this is only going to benefit Mairon Santos more, so I'm going to go with Mairon Santos to win this one by TKO in the second round, counters Francis Marshall, goes for the ground and pound finish, as we saw Isaac Dulgarian do to Marshall, and I believe Santos will be successful in this fight. The only real key to victory Francis Marshall has is, like I said, if he can get him down, but that's a big if against Mairon Santos. So the keys to victory for Mairon Santos is to piece him up on the feet, constant stance switches, constant feints to get him worried, not worried, but, you know, get him guessing, and just piece him up on the feet, land the counter when he dots in, and stay away from the cage, because that's obviously where you're giving Marshall the best opportunity to win. And for Francis Marshall, don't dash in head first. You ain't DDP and you're going to get knocked out. If you dash in head first like you normally do, you're going to get knocked out. So, you know, make sure you work on your takedown entries and just aim to take the fight to the ground as soon as possible. You ain't beating Mairon Santos on the feet. You ain't out striking him. So aim to take the fight to the mat. But as long as you do that without getting your head first, we'll go in with a head first approach. I think that's the best key to victory for Francis Marshall, but I'm going to go with second round TKO to Mairon Santos. Then we've got Alex Morono taking on Carlos Leal. I'm going to go with Carlos Leal to win this one by KO in the second round. If you don't know who Carlos Leal is, in his most recent fight he faced, well, he was actually a former PFL. He's actually a decent prospect in PFL. Comes over to the UFC, debuts against Rinat Fakhretdinov, which is a tough fight to debut against. And he actually beat him, in my opinion. It was one of the biggest robberies of 2024. If you saw that fight, Carlos Leal was kind of piecing him up for 3 rounds straight, or at least 2 rounds, and he lost a decision, and it was kind of one of the most controversial decisions of 2024. I personally think it was one of the biggest robberies that year. I think he should have beaten Rinat Fakhretdinov. He's also probably on steroids, not only because of the amount of acne on his chest, but, you know, just the way that he fight. I'm almost convinced that Carlos Leal's taking some sort of steroids. Alex Morono, this guy, the guy's he's a second away from retirement, you know what I mean? He's this old kind of washed veteran of the UFC. You look at his most recent wins, Court McGee, Tim Means. I mean, if you've been going to the old people's home and fighting your fights there, because these are all old fighters, and I'm not picking a guy who lost to Nico Price in any year after 2022. We lost to him in 2024. And a guy who just recently got outboxed badly by D-Rod, to beat Carlos Leal, who was, like I said, a very dangerous, powerful striker in PFL, and came over and arguably wobbled as well, Rinat Fakhretdinov. So I'm going Carlos Leal to KO him in the second round. I think he gets this one done pretty comfortably. Alex Morono's a very ploddy grappler. He's a ploddy striker who likes to mix it up with the grappling, but his grappling's kind of got worse. Carlos Leal showed that he had a good takedown defense against Rinat Fakhretdinov, who's twice the grappler that Morono is. So I feel like Leal is going to easily keep this fight standing, and I'm not for a second picking Alex Morono, who got outstruck by Nico Price, and could barely beat Tim Means and Court, well, not barely beat, but his last reads have been Tim Means and Court McGee, to beat Carlos Leal, who's this heavy pressure boxer. So I think Carlos Leal gets him against the cage, unloads with the hands on Alex Morono, rips to the body, goes up top, and is going to knock out Alex Morono for his first win in the UFC. Technically, he's second if you're going to count that win over Rinat Fakhretdinov, but very favourable fight for Carlos Leal. I think he gets this one done in the second round. Then the keys to victory for both of these guys, for Alex Morono, don't get pressured. Don't let him get you against the cage as he did against guys in PFL, because you're going to get put to sleep. Mix the striking in with the grappling. You need to use a bit of both in this fight. And just volume everything. This is a very bad matchup, because even with the grappling that Morono has, he ain't taking Leal down. You're going to have to mix everything up and do a lot of volume striking. Stay on the back foot, but don't get pressured against the cage. And then for Carlos Leal, it's to pressure boxing. You know, you want to pressure him with the boxing like you do in most of these fights. Defend the takedowns, which I think he will, based on his takedown defenses against Rinat Fakhretdinov, and force him into a dogfight. Get him against the cage, rough him up, force him into a dogfight, because 58-year-old Alex Morono, who's got about two fights left in his contract, You're going to knock him out. He's got nothing really left to offer. He's a bit of a veteran at this point. I'm going Carlos Leal to win this one by KO at some point in the first couple of rounds. I'm going to go second round, though, to Carlos Leal. Then we have Brunno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. Good fight in the middleweight division. I'm actually looking forward to this one. And I'm going to go with Brunno Ferreira, and I'm going to pick him to win this one by KO in the second round. I'm going early KO for Brunno Ferreira. I think Brunno Ferreira is one of the better prospects in the middleweight division. I think the thing that lets him down is his fight IQ. He recently lost to Abbas Magomedov. He nearly finished Abbas Magomedov. He only wobbled in that fight, and he could have got the win, but his fight IQ let him down. He went for about 50 spinning elbow attacks in that fight against Abbas Magomedov, about 50 spinning elbow attacks, put himself out of position. Just because he got a spinning elbow back against Dustin Stoltzfus, so he was spamming the same move over and over again, ended up getting put into a bad position and got submitted by Abbas Magomedov. So I think if Brunno Ferreira had any sort of fight IQ, he'd be a dominant fighter. Now, I do think that earlier on in this fight, Petrosyan could have success with the striking from a technique perspective. He's quite a good technical striker, is Armen Petrosyan. He was having success against Sharon Magomedov. He's actually quite a decent kickboxer. So I think from a technical perspective, I think we will see Petrosyan have some success early. But a big problem that Petrosyan has is he likes kind of standing and banging. He likes brawling. He likes trading blows with a lot of guys. He did it against Sharaputtin Magomedov in the first round of their fight. And Brunno Ferreira is the last guy you want to be exchanging with. He has brutal power in the middleweight division. One of the hardest hitting middleweights on the roster. Knocked out Gregory Rodriguez. He hits like an absolute truck. He's a machine for the middleweight division, is Brunno Ferreira. I believe at some point in the fight with Ferreira, with his boxing style, he's going to be able to piece up and get that shot on Armen Petrosyan. I think Petrosyan might land a good shot and then get greedy, go for a bit of a combination, get caught by Brunno Ferreira and knocked out. I'm going Brunno Ferreira by knockout. I think he's a really good middleweight prospect. His fight IQ lets him down, but it tends to be fight IQ against these either really tall, rangy strikers like a Ruziboyev or, like I said, grapplers like an Abbas Magomedov. I think in this fight, it's quite favourable for Ferreira. Definitely tough from a kickboxing perspective because Petrosyan's a good kickboxer, but I think Brunno Ferreira will get the knockout shot and will knock out Armen Petrosyan. Then the keys to victory for both of these guys, for Brunno Ferreira, it's to make it a dogfight. Brawl with him, get him in a dogfight because the chances are you land a good shot, he's getting put to sleep. Back him against the cage and fan the big shot to end the fight like you did against Dustin Stoltzfus, like you were trying to do against Gregory Rodriguez, and just rip him to the body. You know, rip him to the body, get his hands lower down, impact his gas tank, just set up the combination so you can get that one big shot up top. And then for Armen Petrosyan, it's to use your range and keep it technical. Don't brawl. Use your range with your kicks as you did against some other guys like Christine Leroy Duncan. Use your range. You can't afford to brawl with him like you did with Sharon Magomedov because you are going to get put to sleep. He has 10 times the power that Magomedov does. And try and aim for a technical, unanimous decision win. Keep it technical. Don't brawl. Don't make it a dogfight. Don't fall into his antics. Just keep it technical. Get the unanimous decision win. And I feel like that's the best key to victory for both of those guys. But I'm going to go with Brunno Ferreira by second round knockout. Then we have two young flyweight prospects going at it with Rei Tsuruya against Joshua Van. I think this is another short notice fight. I forgot who Joshua Van was originally supposed to fight, but I believe this is quite short notice. But I'm going to go with Joshua Van to win, another decision win. Rei Tsuruya's got good jiu-jitsu. He's kind of got that Tatsuro Taira Japanese jiu-jitsu style, which is pretty good because he's got crafty jiu-jitsu, but he didn't look overly amazing in his UFC debut against Carlos Hernandez. He had to kind of rely on Hernandez to shoot the takedown so we could get the better position with the jiu-jitsu. When we've just seen Joshua Van defend takedowns against a heavy pressure wrestler in Cody Djordan, who in my opinion is a much better wrestler than Rei Tsuruya. So I feel like Joshua Van's going to have a good time keeping this fight standing. I don't think Rei Tsuruya's grappling is going to be a big problem for Joshua Van. Then it is a big step up as well to face Van in your second fight in the UFC. And on top of that as well, we've just seen, I mean, Van's one of the best boxers in this division. I think he pieces up Rei Tsuruya on the feet. Van just destroyed Cody Djordan. He's one of the best boxers in the flyweight division right now. His rips to the body, his combinations, his volume striking is so effective. And he, like I said before, he absolutely roughed up Cody Djordan. Now, I don't think it's going to be as bad of a beating that he put on Cody Djordan for Joshua Van because I don't think Rei Tsuruya is going to pressure box him to set up the takedowns. I feel like Rei Tsuruya might be on the back foot a lot in this fight and then occasionally shoot a takedown. So Joshua Van is going to have to work a lot more to get his boxing going. But I just don't see Rei Tsuruya posing a big threat. I think on the feet, Van pieces him up. In the grappling department, Rei Tsuruya is going to have to really work. I'm kind of be lucky to get a takedown on Joshua Van in this fight, so I'm going to go Joshua Van, one of the better flyweight prospects to piece up Rei Tsuruya, get a unanimous decision win over Rei Tsuruya. Now, like I said, Rei Tsuruya is still talented. He has got potential, but I feel like this is a bit of a step up too soon for him against Joshua Van, who's got good takedown defense, who's faced many wrestlers and grapplers before and had success. And he's, like I said, a much better boxer than Rei Tsuruya. Now, the keys to victory for both of these guys, for Rei Tsuruya, don't let him tee off on you. Don't be Cody Djordan walking forward, getting pieced up. You know, don't let him tee off. Take the fight to the mat and make it cagey and messy. Anything you can do to mix up the grappling and take the fight to the mat, or even just hold him against the cage and maybe look for submissions from there is your best opportunity. And use kicks at range. You have got the better range against Joshua Van. Van's a very small flyweight in terms of height, so use your range to kind of piece him apart from there. But don't, you know, brawl with him. Don't get up close and try and box with him or stand with him. And then for Joshua Van, pressure him. Pressure him like you always do with that pressure boxing style. Keep the fight standing and avoid clinching, goes without saying. And just box the bleeding head off him. Like I said about a million times already, one of the best boxers in this division. Go out there and outbox Rei Tsuruya and get the victory. And then we've got one of the more puzzling fights that the UFC have made, and I'm still yet to understand how the UFC or why the UFC have made this fight. Curtis Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev. Rizvan Kuniev making his UFC debut against top 5 Curtis Blaydes. People have been throwing around the word Dagestani privilege. You know, this drug cheat from PFL comes over to the UFC and he gets a top 5 opponent in his debut. I think the UFC have done this differently. I think this could be an indirect shot at Francis Ngannou, because Rizvan Kuniev beat Renan Ferreira, the guy that Ngannou just beat. They might try and get Curtis Blaydes to beat Rizvan Kuniev, which is why they've given him in so early. And then that makes the Renan Ferreira win look bad on Ngannou in some sort of way. But either way, I'm going Curtis Blaydes by TKO in the first round now. I'm not daft. Rizvan Kuniev's definitely one of the better heavyweight prospects we've got right now because of the, you know, the well-roundedness, the fact that he came from PFL and beat one of their champions. But he didn't look super dominant in that fight with Renan Ferreira. Ferreira's a fucking terrible grappler. And there were times in that fight, quite early on in the fight as well, where Ferreira was able to counter Rizvan Kuniev with the grappling and get top position. And it was a bit of a back and forth fight with the grappling against Renan Ferreira. But even on the Contender Series, as dominant as Rizvan Kuniev was in that fight with the striking, it isn't like his defense was amazing. He was getting caught a lot by these complete cans. And I feel like that's why Curtis Blaydes is a terrible matchup, because Blaydes, I mean, first of all, he's had to deal with many grapplers in his career. I mean, 2 fights ago, he had to deal with Gelton Almeida. He's had to deal with a lot of grapplers before. Also, when we talk about the stand-up, like I said, Rizvan Kuniev is not defensively sound. Blaydes is an underrated striker. He was tagging Tom Aspinall. He's got really long reach for the division of Curtis Blaydes, and he is quite a tall, rangy guy on the feet. And when it comes to wrestling, I think he's a way better wrestler than Rizvan Kuniev. If you're getting countered by Renan Ferreira in the grappling, I think Curtis Blaydes is going to have a field day with the wrestling in this fight, and I think he's a much more dangerous wrestler than Kuniev. Kuniev's a bit of a lay-and-pray grappler. He likes laying on people, getting the control time. Curtis Blaydes, if he's comfortable in top position, he's going to try raining down ground and pound. I remember that finish he had over, what's his name, Overeem, where he absolutely destroyed him with the ground and pound. I'm going Curtis Blaydes by TKO. It's a huge step up for Rizvan Kuniev. I mean, we saw it last year when Shamil Gaziev, this Dagestani heavyweight prospect, fought against Rosenstrike in his second fight and he got completely outboxed. And now you're putting Rizvan Kuniev in his first fight against Curtis Blaydes in the UFC. I don't like this matchmaking. I don't expect him to be as good as he was in PFL now that he's off the steroids. And even though he looked decent on the Contender Series, he still looked hittable and he looked good against tomato cans. And now you put him in against Curtis Blaydes. I'm going Razor Blaydes to beat this one by TKO in the first round. You've just gone from a title fight with Aspinall to a guy who's never fought in the UFC. I'm going Curtis Blaydes. I think he's going to land with the range on the feet, land against Rizvan Kuniev, not necessarily outbox him and completely outstrike him, but I feel like at some point in the fight he might wobble him or, you know, find a takedown entry, take down Rizvan Kuniev and just get the TKO via ground and pound in the first fight. So I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes by TKO in the first. The keys to victory for both of these guys: for Curtis Blaydes, it's to keep the fight standing and tag him with your reach, but inevitably mix up the striking with the grappling. I feel like Curtis Blaydes is one of the best fighters in the UFC when it comes to mixing the striking with the grappling. You think he's going to come up top and he's shot a takedown. You think he's going to shoot a takedown and he's cracked up top, and just show him level. Show him that you ain't UFC worthy. You're a drug cheat from PFL and now you're coming to the big league. You know, get out the rankings. Yeah, Curtis Blaydes, show him levels. And then for Rizvan Kuniev, it's to pressure strike as you did in the Contender Series, which worked quite well. Hold him against the cage. Once use your pressure striking to hold him against the cage and look to take him down, and just lay and pray him. Take him down. Don't bother I mean, you can go for ground and pound, you can go for submissions, but just lay and pray him. Give him the best opportunity of getting a decision win in this fight, like Jalin Almeida tried doing to Curtis Blaydes. So lay and pray, hold him against the cage, look to take him down. Then when it is on the feet, try and pressure strike him. And then we've got the main card, Bobby Green versus Mauricio Ruffy, or should I call him Robbie Greenwood, because there ain't nobody calling him King Green in 2025. I'm going to go with Mauricio Ruffy by decision. I know Mauricio Ruffy by knockout is another big take, because Bobby Green is a very chinny fighter. You know what I mean? I mean, he's just been submitted, but before that, he got wobbled in the first round by Jim Miller. He had one of the most brutal knockout losses in the world against Jalin Turner, and he's been knocked out before. But I'm going to go Mauricio Ruffy by decision. I think this could go quite similar to Fiziev versus Green. Not in the sense that Mauricio Ruffy's got a similar style to Fiziev, but I can see Bobby Green losing the majority of the fight via the kickboxing of Mauricio Ruffy, but he's still got the volume boxing. He's still countering back with the boxing offense. But I feel like ultimately he is going to be a fight where Mauricio Ruffy's tagging Bobby Green, doing the better with the striking, using his crafty kind of fighting nerds-esque style to piece up Bobby Green and just landing on him with the rangy striker that he is. And I feel like he's going to pick up a decision when I could see him knocking out Bobby Green. But to be fair to Green, he is defensively quite sound. His shoulder roll and his boxing defense is quite good on the feet. But I feel like Mauricio Ruffy is a much better striker. He's going to piece up Bobby Green, get the victory. And I think the reason I'm picking him to win by decision as well is because if he doesn't get Bobby Green out early, I don't think he's going to get a stoppage, because we saw Mauricio Ruffy against James Lontop in his most recent fight. And James Lontop was kind of not roughing him up, but was doing better in that third round. And it seemed like Mauricio Ruffy was kind of gassed in that third round against James Lontop. And now you're facing Bobby Green, who's got good 3-round stamina, is a good volume striker. I could see Bobby Green potentially winning the third round, but ultimately, I think the fight is going to be Mauricio Ruffy picking apart Robbie Green for the majority of the fight. Bobby Green might answer back with a bit of boxing and might still be in the fight for the whole fight and might be taunting Mauricio Ruffy as he does in every single one of his fights. But I do think Ruffy's the better striker, and I am going to go with Mauricio Ruffy to win this one by decision, at least 2-1, a unanimous decision against Bobby Green. And like I said, Bobby Green, I don't know how old he is now, but he's up there nearly in his 40s in the lightweight division. He's lost 2 of his last 3. He's been wobbled in 2 of his last 3. He got brutally finished by Jalin Turner, wobbled by Jim Miller. I do worry about the chin of Robbie Green in this fight, so I'm going to go with Ruffy. One of the better fighting nerds prospects. Just like, well, I don't know, not one of the better fighting nerds prospects, but a fighting nerds prospect. And I'm picking him to win by decision. Now, the keys to victory for Bobby Green, it's the volume strike. Don't try and knock him out. Just volume strike as you normally do, like you did against Jim Miller. Stay defensively sound and try and take it into round 3 and go hard then. Don't try and, look for the finish early on, or just don't try and look for the finish at all. But if you can take it into the third round, that's your best opportunity, because we have seen Mauricio Ruffy gas before. So take it into the third round, and maybe that's when you look for more of a finishing approach. And from Mauricio Ruffy, don't throw out the kitchen sink looking for a finish in the first round like you did against James Lontop. Stay crafty with the striking, because it always works in your favor. And just be careful of his boxing. Bobby Green ain't no slouch. This ain't no Alex Morono, Carlos Leal situation where it's a free win. Bobby Green's still got decent boxing. So be careful of his boxing, be careful of his stand-up, but ultimately do Mauricio Ruffy things, stay crafty with the stand-up, and I'd say, yeah, just pick them apart. And then we've got Amanda Lemos versus Iasmin Lucindo. I mean, I think every MMA fan and their dog can't wait to see this fight more than Bobby Green and Mauricio Ruffy. But in all seriousness, this is quite a tough fight to pick, because you've got Iasmin Lucindo, who's a bit of a prospect in women MMA, against Amanda Lemos, who's more of not a journeyman, more of a gatekeeper these days. But I'm going to be going with Amanda Lemos to win this one by decision. I just think from a clash of styles, it's a tough fight for Lucindo. I mean, to be fair, she won a really, really close fight against Marina Rodriguez. She didn't win that in dominant fashion as a lot of people expected her to. And you just look at Iasmin Lucindo. Where is she going to win the fight? I think if she keeps this fight standing, as we've seen her do before, Amanda Lemos is going to pick her apart. She's a good volume striker as Amanda Lemos, but she also packs a little bit of power as well. And if she ends up going with the grappling approach, which, let's be honest, she probably will try and take the fight to the mat, is Lucindo. I know we've seen Lemos deal with bad grapplers before, or deal with grappling bad before when she faced Jandiroba and Dern, but we've also seen her get up against Mackenzie Dern, who's a much better grappler than Lucindo, and she absolutely beat the brakes off Mackenzie Dern as well. So I feel like Lucindo's going to come in with a grappling-heavy game plan. She might land a takedown or 2 on Lemos, but eventually I think Lemos will get the fight back up to the feet, and that's where she's going to do her best work. Volume striking, pick them apart, Iasmin Lucindo. Like I said, she's faced grapplers before in Jandiroba, in Whaley, and Dern, and I know she struggles with grappling, but I feel like she will be able to get up from Lucindo, who hasn't got the most dominant grappling, and she'll be able to land the shots on the feet, pick her apart, and win a unanimous decision. And if Lucindo decides to strike with Lemos, I mean, she's just signing up for a dominant dominant loss anyway. So I'm going to go with Amanda Lemos to win this one by decision. I think she's a decent gatekeeper for this strawweight division, and I think she will get out and just outbox Iasmin Lucindo for the majority of the fight. So I'm going to go with Amanda Lemos by decision. The keys to victory for Amanda Lemos, it's to defend takedowns. Stay busy on your back if you do get taken down, but ultimately look to defend the takedowns. Counter strike and volume strike. If Lucindo comes in just like a Mackenzie Dern did, look to counter strike because that seemed to work in your favor. I'm just volume strike and get the points on the feet and keep her on the back foot to minimize the effectiveness of the takedowns. And for Iasmin Lucindo, mix the striking it with the grappling, but aim to take her down and keep her down, because standing up with Amanda Lemos is not where you've got the key, not where you've got the advantage. The grappling is where you've got the advantage. You take her down and keep her down, because historically that's where Amanda Lemos struggles the most. And then we've got the featured fight, Jalin Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. I believe these guys are two of the tallest lightweights on the roster as well, which is going to be quite interesting to see in the octagon. But yeah, this should be a good fight, because between them they've got 30 combined wins, 26 of those wins coming by finish. So I do think it's going to be a finish, and I am going to go in favor of Jalin Turner. I'm not sure about the betting odds. I don't know if Jalin Turner's an underdog or not, but I think Jalin Turner's going to KO him in the first round in this fight. You look at Jalin Turner's last 5 fights. I know this is going to be a big if situation, but he could have knocked out Renato Moicano had he gone for a finish. I know it's a big if and he didn't, but he dropped Moicano. If he'd gone for the ground and pound, he would have knocked him out. Before that, he got one of the most brutal knockouts of all time against Bobby Green. Before that, he had lost a very close decision in a fight of the year against Dan Hooker. And before that, he lost another very, very close decision against Mateus Gamrot, which has aged quite well. And before that, he was on a 5-fight winning streak of straight first and second round finishes in the UFC. I think Jalin Turner's quite an underrated lightweight. He's still very dangerous. I know he kind of fumbles every big fight, but he's still a very dangerous fighter as Jalin Turner, especially for the division with how powerful he is. And for Bahamondes, I feel like all the lightweights getting a shot at the rankings, I didn't expect it to be Bahamondes. I thought it would be somebody like Yoel Alvarez or Ferreira. Bahamondes is quite unexpected. And you look at Bahamondes, I know he's coming off that really good knockout over Manuel Torres at UFC 306, but he's very hittable as Bahamondes. He doesn't really have a lot of head movement. He leaves his chin quite up in the air. He's quite hittable with his pressure boxing style. And I feel like a guy like Jalin Turner, who's so rangy and will be by far the most rangy guy that Bahamondes is for, and the power that Turner has, and the striking ability. The fact that, like, that win over Bobby Green, I know he was brutal, but the fact that he was able to catch Bobby Green that early on in the fight, and we know how good Green's defense is impressive for Jalin Turner. I think he KOs Bahamondes in the first round. I see Bahamondes coming in with that pressure style, pressuring Jalin Turner against the cage, and then ultimately 1-2 down the pipe, Jalin Turner lands a big shot, knocks out Bahamondes, and gets back in the winning column again, because he's making these fights against top lightweights very close as Jalin Turner, and in some of them he's fucking brutalizing them. So keys to victory for Jalin Turner: right hand down the middle, counter when he pressures, use those oblique kicks to keep him away, and obviously impose your range, and capitalize on his pressure style with your reach. Essentially, just when he's pressuring him, use your range, use your reach to pick him apart and land that 1-2. And then for Bahamondes, feints. Don't just go in there with, because Bahamondes is a very kind of basic, not a basic style, but he doesn't really tend to feint a lot in his fights. He kind of just throws. So use a lot of feints, stay defensively sound when you're facing a guy as dangerous as Jalin Turner, and use your kicks at range too. Jalin Turner's probably never really faced a guy as rangy as you either, so use your kicks at range and try and get the better of Jalin Turner. But I'm going to go with Jalin Turner by first round KO. And then we've got the co-main event. Justin Gaethje taking on Rafael Fiziev. Was obviously supposed to be Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, and now the rematch has been signed. We're going to be seeing Justin Gaethje take on Rafael Fiziev part 2. If we go back to the rematch, if we go back to the first fight, which I think in this case is relevant considering the first fight was only 2 years ago. I mean, in Fiziev's case, the last proper fight that he had before the injury was Justin Gaethje, so the first fight is still very relevant. I think it's going to be very similar. Fiziev might be piecing up Justin Gaethje early on with that Muay Thai style. It's a bit of a back and forth fight between the two of them. But I feel like the fact that it is on short notice and Fiziev stepping up on 10 days notice, and the fact that he is coming off an injury in his most recent performance and he's been out for so long, I'm going to go with Justin Gaethje to win a decision. I have no reason to not go with Justin Gaethje to win. Even if we hadn't seen the first fight, I'd probably still go with Gaethje to win, because I feel like with Rafael Fiziev, he's a good striker, but I feel like he looks better than he actually is. Like, the optics of Rafael Fiziev with that kind of heavy Muay Thai fighting style, it looks better than he actually is. It's not as effective as it looks. And like I said, if we go back to the first fight, Fiziev found success early against Justin Gaethje, kind of picking him apart. We also saw Gaethje with those leg kicks early on, and they were kind of trading back and forth. But later on in the fight, that's where we saw Gaethje have the best chance, where Fiziev was kind of gassed out. He had nothing left in the tank against Justin Gaethje, and ultimately Gaethje was able to pick up a pretty good decision. And I don't expect why this fight is going to be any different. Fiziev's been inactive. He hasn't won since the Gaethje fight. This is on short notice, so you can only imagine that the gas tank for Rafael Fiziev is going to be a lot worse, and he's going to be a little bit rusty. So I am going to go with Justin Gaethje to win a decision. I do think it's going to be a dogfight, two frogs in a blender, two guys just going at it and putting on a scrap. But I feel like because of the activity, because of the stamina, and just because of the high level talent that Gaethje's constantly been facing, I'm going to go Justin Gaethje to win a decision. Now, there is a little bit of worry, and I'm not going to assume that Justin Gaethje's washed, but he's been out for like 9 months. He's getting up there in age. In his most recent fight, he got completely flatlined by Max Holloway. And before that, he was getting pieced apart by Max Holloway. There might be a little bit of worry in me that worries that Justin Gaethje might have left all of his heart out there before. It might not. Justin Gaethje just might not have that much to offer anymore, if you know what I mean. He might be a little bit, again, not washed, but he might not be prime Justin Gaethje. And Rafael Fiziev being this young, kind of fresh striker coming back up to the UFC to face Justin Gaethje, I feel like this could be a bad fight for Gaethje, where he kind of gets picked apart for 3 rounds, just like he did against Max Holloway by Rafael Fiziev. But I trust that Justin Gaethje is going to get this one done. I'm going to go with Justin Gaethje by decision. And the keys to victory for both of these guys. For Justin Gaethje, it's similar to the first fight. Take the fight into the later rounds, because his gas tank likely isn't going to be there because he's been sat on the couch. He hasn't even had a fight booked. And just bang with him. Make it a good fight. Do Justin Gaethje things. Go out there and bang with him. Look for, that in the middle pocket boxing. And then for Rafael Fiziev, pace yourself better. You've got to pace yourself better, especially coming in on short notice. You've got to pace yourself better than the first fight. Fight in bursts. Don't be technical for 24 minutes. Rafael Fiziev, he's not type of one of these fighters that does well when he's technical for 25 minutes straight like a Max Holloway. You've got to fight in bursts. Fighting like a 5-shot burst where you go out there and do a bit of a combination, go out, get your recovery back, go back in with another combination. Fighting bursts, I think, is the best style for Rafael Fiziev. And just avoid brawling. It's only going to affect your gas tank even more. I know you would have put him a good fight, but if we're talking about keys to just pure victory, brawling would not be the most beneficial key to victory for Rafael Fiziev. And then we've got the main event. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. The toughest fight for Porton in the division. Listen, it's been fun seeing Alex Pereira face the likes of Khalil Roundtree and Yuri Prochazka, but this is the fight that I feel like we've been waiting for a long time, because we know how bad of a matchup Ankalaev is to Porton. Now, I feel like there's two big narratives that I agree with, two big narratives that I think are going into this fight that a lot of people don't agree with. First of all, Ankalaev will shoot takedowns. This whole narrative that Ankalaev's going to keep the fight standing and he's not going to shoot a takedown, I disagree. I think Ankalaev's 100% going to be shooting takedowns. He's not going to fumble another title shot against Alex Pereira. He's not going to fumble another title opportunity, and he knows deep down that grappling with Alex Pereira is his best key to victory. I think he's going to mix it up with the striking, but saying that Ankalaev ain't going to grapple, I think is a terrible kind of narrative. And the second narrative is that Porton will defend takedowns, and I agree with this. If you think with the work that Glove Teixeira has been doing with Porton since his move up to the light heavyweight division that he hasn't been working on grappling, even in training camps against strikers, you're delusional. I expect Porton's grappling to be a lot better. I expect him to have a much better takedown defense than we've seen in the past, and I feel like those are just the two big narratives. Porton's going to have good takedown defense, but don't get it twisted, Ankalaev's going to shoot takedowns. Now, the way to simplify this fight is Ankalaev is a decent striker with decent wrestling, and Alex Pereira's an elite striker with, like I said, unknown wrestling, because we haven't really seen it get tested recently. But I'm going to go with Alex Pereira to win this one by TKO in the 4th round. I think we're going to see Porton piece up Ankalaev for a lot of the fight, keep the fight standing, maybe get taken down once or twice, but for the majority of the fight, it is going to be stand-up where we see Porton have success. If we go back to the fight with Jan Blachowicz against Magomed Ankalaev, we saw him get his legs absolutely destroyed by Jan Blachowicz. Nearly got finished because of how bad the leg kicks were from Jan Blachowicz. And if there's anything that Porton does amazing, it is the leg kicks. Porton's known for having really effective leg kicks. He's shown it against nearly everyone he's faced in the UFC. And I feel like this is going to be a big key to victory for Porton on the feet. He's going to be slashing the legs of Magomed Ankalaev early on, investing in the legs early on. And I just feel like we are going to see Ankalaev go in there with a bit of a grappling style. We're going to see him hold Alex against the cage, maybe shoot a takedown or two. But I feel like the majority of the fight is going to be taking place on the feet, where Porton's going to be doing the better and piecing up Ankalaev, until eventually at some point in the fight we're going to see Porton, as the most dangerous fighter in the UFC, land that shot. I really think that Porton's going to land that shot against Magomed Ankalaev. as good as Ankalaev is and as well-rounded as he is, you're facing the most dangerous fighter in the UFC. It isn't even like I said before, Ankalaev's an amazing grappler. It's not like, this isn't Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira or, you know, some Umar Magomedov type fighter where it's this really good Dagestani wrestler. Like I said, he's a decent wrestler and he's a decent striker, but he's not elite anywhere the fight goes. He's not better than Alex on the feet. I don't think his wrestling is going to be that good to the point where he can dominate Alex with the grappling. And you look at Ankalaev's recent fights, decision against Alexander Rakic, knockout over Johnny Walker, that was a good knockout, but Johnny Walker's the chinniest in the UFC. Draw with Jan Blachowicz, I did think he won, to be fair. And then an injury win over Anthony Smith, and he hasn't beaten any of the top light heavyweights. He hasn't beaten a Khalil Roundtree, he hasn't beaten a Yuri, he hasn't beaten a Hill, he didn't beat Glover back in the day, he hasn't beaten Alex yet, he didn't even beat Jan Blachowicz, so I am going to go with Alex Pereira by TKO in the 4th round. You've also got to factor in Ramadan as well, that you can only imagine is going to impact Magomed Ankalaev. I really hope Ankalaev isn't using this as like an early excuse, but you can only imagine that that's going to affect Ankalaev even more. So I'm going to go with Alex Pereira by TKO in the 4th round. It's going to be a bit of a grappling and a striking matchup, a bit of the both in this fight. But I do think Ankalaev is going to get his legs destroyed by Porton, and then at some point in the fight, later on in the fight probably, Porton's going to land that left hook or just land that big shot. He's going to drop Ankalaev, maybe even knock him out cold and get the finish by TKO. And I'm going with the 4th round TKO for Alex Pereira. Now, the keys to victory for Alex and Ankalaev. For Alex, it's to attack the leg early on. Don't let him back you up against the cage like he did against Jan Blachowicz, and just knock him the fuck out, because that's what you do best. In fact, Magomed Ankalaev, please don't strike with him for too long, because you are going to get knocked out. I know he's been tweeting saying that he's going to strike and knock out Porton. You're not. Don't strike with him for too long and get knocked out before you have the chance to mix in the grappling. And that's what I think he should adopt, a grappling-heavy game plan. And stay careful. Use striking to set up takedowns and vice versa. You've got to do a bit of both in this fight because you are a well-rounded fighter. And yeah, those are my picks for UFC 313. If we do a bit of a pick overview, my high-confidence picks are Justin Gaethje, Mauricio Ruffy, Curtis Blaydes, Joshua Van, Carlos Leal, Mairon, Santos, and Chris Gutierrez. Those are my high-confidence picks where I'm pretty confident that they're going to go in the favor of the fighter that I've picked. My medium confidence picks are Alex Pereira, Jalin Turner, Brunno Ferreira, and Djordan Santos. So I think these guys are going to win. I wouldn't bet the house on these guys winning, but I still have good faith that they are going to win. Then my only low confidence pick is Amanda Lemos to beat Iasmin Lucindo. I feel like that fight could go either way. I'm leaning towards Lemos winning though, but it is a low confidence picks. But those are my picks for UFC 313. Let me know your thoughts on this card. I think it's a really good pay-per-view card, both with the fights that have been made and just how good the card is on paper. Let me know if you agree or disagree with the predictions that I made, and thank you for watching.